So I'm talking today about inverses of exponentials and logarithmic functions. This question says rewrite y equals natural log of x plus 3. So natural log is x log e. First thing, we get the 3 over to the other side, transpose to take 3 to the other side of the equation. Now, to get the x out of the logarithm, we're going to raise it to the power. So remember, the base stays the same and the x and the y change. Just pause there for okay, sorry about that. We had a little technical difficulty. I didn't have the program set properly. Here we go. The base stays the same, so the base e stays the same, and the x and the y, so this part here, goes to the power. So the base stays the same and that goes to the power. Okay, so when we rewrite that, that becomes x equals e to the power of y take 3. Okay, let's find the inverse of function of x equals 3 log to the base e of x plus 1 plus 2. And we're going to really look at the domain and the range of the inverse function. First of all, we write out our rule. Remember that we have to let y equal 3 natural log x plus 1 plus 2, and we need to say to find the inverse of x, we're going to swap x and y. This part's really important in terms of our, if we don't write that, the examiners will take off a mark. Now, when I swap x and y, x equals 3 natural log of y plus 1 plus 2. Now we're just going to transpose to get the y by itself. So subtract 2 from both sides, divide both sides by 3. Now we've got that log, natural log to the base e, log to the base e of y plus 1. We're going to raise that to the power. So when we raise it, the power stays the same, the base stays the same, the power comes out, and what was on the other side goes into the power. So base stays the same, what was inside comes outside, and what was on the other side of the equal sign becomes a new power. Subtract 1. Now this is not my answer. I really should have written that as inverse of x equals that. Remember, if I write y equals, the examiners will take a mark off. We'll get to that in a minute. Let's have a look at the graph. Here's a graph that I've made up. In blue is the logarithmic graph, 3 natural log of x plus 1 plus 2. So blue is our original graph, our logarithmic graph. And in red is our exponential graph, y equals e to the power of x take 2 over 3 minus 1. What you'll notice is that these two graphs are inverses of each other. They reflect, that is, they reflect through the line y equals x. And they intersect at the points on the line y equals x. Okay. Just waiting there for a minute. Just had a little technical difficulty there, so I waited for it to finish what it was doing. So you'll notice here, I've rewritten this, I've left my x off. It should say, so the inverse function of x is e to the power of x take 2 over 3 minus 1. The part that I'm really interested in is the domain of the original value graph. So let's have a look at the blue graph. And the domain of that, it has an asymptote at minus 1, so its domain is from minus 1 up to infinity. And its range is all real numbers. What we're going to do now is remember, and this is important, when we make an inverse, the range of the original becomes the domain of the inverse. and the domain of the original becomes the range of the inverse. So because we've swapped x and y, the domain and the range also swap. So now we're looking at the red graph, and we're saying the domain of the inverse is all real numbers, and the range of the inverse is from -1 to infinity. Okay, now we're going to transpose this equation. Rewrite p equals a to the e to the power of kt with t as the subject. You notice t is in the power. To get that down, we're going to have to, first of all, divide both sides by a. Now we're going to use logarithms. So the base stays the same, the x and the y value change, so kt equals log to the base e of p on a. Divide both sides by k, to get t by itself. And that's our answer. So that's our answer there. We've rearranged to get t by itself. Okay, let's find the inverse of function of x equals 2e to the power of x take 3. Again, state the equation. Let y equals 2e to the power of x take 3. To find function of x, the inverse, we're going to swap x and y. Must write that down. Swap x and y, so x becomes 2 to the power e to the power of y take 3. Plus 3 to both sides. Divide both sides by 2. I've jumped a little step there. Now I'm saying y equals the log of x plus 3 divided by 2. So you can see the base stays the same, the x and the y have changed. I've written it correctly this time. The inverse function of x equals log x plus 3 over 2. Now here's our graph. The blue graph is the first graph. The blue graph is the blue graph is this graph, and the red graph is this graph. So let's consider the domain and the range. So for the inverse, the domain for that is, for the original graph, I should say, the original blue graph, the domain is all real numbers. The range is -3 to infinity. The range and the domain swap. So for the inverse, the domain is now -3 to infinity, and the range of the inverse is all real numbers.